Okay, so
Good morning.
hey, we're really excited to be here. This is Sarah Ricketts. She is the most amazing individual and sassy and funny and coolest person I've met thus far. So we're just gonna dive really quickly into it. As you know, this is our fireside chat with our keynote, our opening keynote for the day. This is Sarah Ricketts. She is a Latina leader with 15 years of experience in business technology and digital transformation across financial services, travel, software, and the software industries. In her current role as a director of business solutions at Intuit, she leads a team focused on Mailchimp's customer-facing team's tech stack. As a mother and grandmother, let me just repeat that because that's wild. Look at the youngness. Look at the skin glowing. I love it. Sorry. Let me refocus. As a mother and grandmother, she takes her personal time seriously. And an example of that is completing 3 degrees in 4 years, all while working full time and taking care of her growing family. So without further ado, I'm just going to sit back for 2 more seconds. Sarah, please feel free to add in any other thing that you want to.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. How's everyone doing? Oh my gosh, I want to meet her. Alexis, intro, please. Intro. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm so excited to be here. I think being a part of our own community and really highlighting the things that are possible is so important. So I'm looking forward to this talk and just making sure that everybody understands that by the end of this, everyone belongs. And so it's really important to realize that we have to unveil ourselves and be part of our community and really know that the mesa is not for anyone that doesn't look like us, but the mesa is for all of us.
Period, right? We always need our seats at the table, whether that's creating our own or whatever the case. So love that.
All day.
We're going to dive right in. First question. So can you talk about your experience leading up to where you are right now at this stage in your life?
Oh my gosh, so much has happened. Let's just talk about the fact that I'm just a little Puerto Rican girl, a little Boricua that grew up in a really small city in Massachusetts, born and raised in Western Massachusetts. So if anyone's out online checking in, let me know where you're from because I really want to understand it. But my community was different. I was born in Springfield, Massachusetts, raised in a really small city called Holyoke. And what's fascinating as I look back, and even when I go back home to visit, I realized just how small it is, but how big it felt at that point in time. And the fact that my community around me looked like me, they sounded like me. But the fascinating part was when I was going to school and in the working community, they didn't all look and sound like me. And so that dynamic of understanding culturally that we stay amongst each other because it's a comfort. A huge population of Puerto Ricans live in that region. So as many of you know, as Puerto Rico became part of the United States, it opened up the door for a lot of our community to come to the United States. And we are sprinkled everywhere, but for some strange reason, that region is highly populated. And when I say that region, I'm talking about the Northeast, right? So if you go to New York, you go to Jersey, you go to Pennsylvania, you go to Rhode Island, you're going to find a huge population of Puerto Ricans. Hence why I thought my community that looked like me was exactly what I was seeing it wasn't. So on my journey, grew up in a community that my teachers didn't look like me, they didn't sound like me, they didn't encourage me like they encouraged the other students in the population. One specific scenario where I remember was going through the process of looking at colleges and trying to decide what I was going to do with myself. And I remember sitting with my mom, my grandmother, and my grandfather were ill throughout their process when I was growing up. And I remember being at the pharmacy and I was like, oh, man, that looks like such an easy job. They're just like giving people's pills. They're giving them bottles. I'm like, I just want to do that. I could go to school for that. I'm just going to go be a legal drug dealer, right? So if you think about that, the dynamic of I could go to school, get a degree, and I can actually provide these drugs or medication into the community and to others. And so I set out to do that. And so my first encounter of learning that or realizing that I didn't belong like the rest of them was going to my school counselor and talking to my school counselor about the schools I was looking at. And he was like, okay, these are great. They're colleges and universities, and you're looking at becoming a pharmacist. So the programs were different. And he looked at me and said, have you considered any community colleges? Here I am. I am in the top 20% of my population as far as GPA. So I'm close to a 4.0 because the student population was large. Why are you asking me? Do I need to go and consider a community college? I'm doing well. I'm doing amazing. And you don't want to consider me just like everyone else. And so I went home, I signed up for the schools that I wanted to go to, and I came back with a letter of acceptance and showed them that I don't need to go to a community college when I have what I need to be able to go to a regular university or college. So that's like check one in my journey of, okay, I proved it out. Unfortunately, throughout that journey, and we're going to cut out a lot because we could talk forever, but I had children. I stopped going to college. I went to the workforce. But one thing that I never stopped pursuing was I was going to get my education, regardless. It didn't matter whether I got it then or later in life. And so in 2001, literally 1 week before 9/11, and that's like ingrained in my head, I went back to school and I went into a college program that was only on Saturdays. The classes were 6 weeks long, so I could take 2 classes every Saturday. I worked full time. I had 2 children at that point. I was doing what I had to do. And literally for 4 years, I feel like I don't remember what I did because I worked Monday through Friday. I took care of the kids, made sure they were taken care of. I was part of bringing them to swim practice and baseball practice and doing all the things, but it was doing homework at night, doing homework in the morning, doing homework during lunch, doing homework at their events. Wherever I could get my homework done, I did it. And one of the things I remember going through that process, it was an all women's college. So I got my associates, my bachelor's, and my master's in a 4-year period of time. And I remember that we cried. Women cried together because it wasn't just about our culture. It was about the bonding of the fact that we all were pursuing the same thing. We just wanted to give a better life for our families. And I remember seeing all of the women, all colors, all types, all shapes, all sizes at different points. Either some were retired, they were trying to figure out their life. Some were just starting. Some had been away from college or education for 30, 40, 50 years. And we were all sitting in a classroom just trying to make it. During that time, I happened to be working for a company called Mass Mutual. It is a huge insurance company in that region. I got to experience all kinds of things because I wasn't afraid. But one thing that was certain was that my mother always encouraged me, do what you have to do. That's one thing that's critical about family. Bring them in, hold them close. They will help you get to where you need to get to. The most critical factor in this entire journey was I didn't set out to be in tech. I didn't set out to do what I'm doing today. I set out to get a degree, get an education, showcase what I can do for my family, and then get ahead as fast as possible by beating the odds because everybody didn't look like me.
Oh my gosh, I'm sweating out here. I don't know if it's the tea. I don't know if it's what you're saying, but wow. Seriously, no, that's amazing because it comes to these points where, you know, you have such a great village, right, to support you in this and encourage you, like your mom, for example. So that's really, really great to hear. And this is just a fun fact of the day. There's a show on Netflix called Blue Zones. I don't know if anyone has like seen it or whatever, but they mention like people living longer or whatever the case because of like their village that they hold. So it's really, really important that you're mentioning like your village and your support system overall, especially with your journey that wasn't even intentional of being into tech, but all of a sudden you ended up here, years later, but you did it. And exactly, Brenda Rangel said, you are self-made. Yes, you are, dear. Yes, you are. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next question here. So how do you think the conceptions of Latina traditions affect us voicing our thoughts and opinions within society?
Oh my gosh, there's so much that can be unveiled there. It's not just about my heritage, it's all of our heritage, right? The communities that we have and we come from, depending on the generation you are, right? So I'll give you a fun fact. My mother was born and raised in the United States. She's 100% Boricua. But my grandparents came from Puerto Rico. So the tradition was tight, right? It was like, here's the way you should be. Here's the way children should act. Here's the way you should raise your family. And then my father was born in Puerto Rico, came over, right? Same thing, very cultural. But there was a big difference between the two of them. Being that my mother was born and raised in the United States, she had a different perspective, right? She was like, I belong where I belong. You're not going to push me out. And so she always instilled in me, go do what you got to do, like stay focused, but go do what you got to do. But there was still that tradition of children shouldn't be in the way. Children should learn to respect their elders, right? And so on my father's side, the difference was that he was culturally still tied to that tradition. Like men are the ones of the household. He was very overbearing, love him to death. But unfortunately, he had just a different way of life. And he didn't see or value how a woman could be in charge or could be outspoken or could be at the table and being part of the community. And it was a very different upbringing between the two of them. So when I think of culturally, I think back, like I remember my grandfather being so stern with my mom, like keep an eye on her, make sure everything's right, and just trying to keep us all on the straight and narrow. And then everyone else around us, the community was the same way because it was old school culture. The men were the men of the household. Much respect to all my men out there. Not saying that it's not, but the reality of it was that the women tended to be more quiet, more timid, more to the back. But when you come to the reality of it, I'm going to tell you something that's true and always stands. A woman can turn the neck of any man. A woman has the brains that can power an entire community. It can bring people to their knees in a journey, in a way. But oftentimes in our community, those women are the quietest ones. They're the ones that don't speak up. They're the ones that don't come to the table. They tend to stay more timid, and their voice is brought out through others, but they're not necessarily the ones that are showcasing their voice. And so what's happened is through time, depending on what generation you are, the generations has shifted and changed. And now we're in a time where this new generation, they're outspoken, they're fabulous, they're incredible, they don't care. It's like, hey, yo estoy aquí, and that's what it is. You're going to take me how I am, and I don't care, right? And so what we're teaching our children now forward is don't be the ones that are meek and quiet. But when you go back traditionally, we are told to stay quiet. Don't rebel, don't make sure, don't, how should I say this differently? Don't trouble the waters, right? Stay quiet, stay on the sidelines, do your job, stay focused, keep your head down. No, keep your head up, look around, pay attention to what's happening in the environment because you belong just like everyone else. However, how do we break the mold and how do we teach our new generation forward that, yes, you can have a loud voice. Yes, you can be part of the community. Yes, you can be just as strong as anybody else. However, I want you to still keep that soft side of your traditions. Showcase how you can be strong, but don't overdo it in a way that we're looked at as angry Latinos.
I'm curious. This is a side note question. How do you avoid that microaggression, right? Like, because I love what you're saying, but I personally, like, I do struggle coming off as not the spicy or angry Latina or whatever other microaggression there is out there. So like, I love that you're saying showcase your strength, but not to a point where you come off this way. So any two quick side tips on how to do that?
Yeah, for sure. I think number one is, and what's most new to our lifestyles now is it's okay to showcase that you're passionate. Passion and anger are two different things. And so I think what we're learning behaviorally is that it's not angry, it's that I'm passionate. We're naturally very loud. And so when we're naturally very loud, it comes off as, oh my gosh, she's attacking. So what I've learned is as I'm working in a new environment or working with new individuals, I always come off and say, hey, I ask a lot of questions. I am that one in the room that when you start talking about certain things, I'm probably going to ask you at least 10 to 12 questions before the end of the meeting. So I'm going to let you know in advance. Number two is I might come off a little loud. It's just passion. And I'm just showcasing and kind of preparing them for the interaction we're about to have. I think if we don't prepare them and help them understand that I'm bringing my whole self to this conversation and it has nothing to do with you, but all to do with the fact that I want to be able to showcase my opinions, my questions, and what I can provide at the table, um, it can be difficult. So, number one, definitely, I think know your audience and educate your audience. There's nothing wrong with educating your audience. If they choose to walk away and say, I don't like the way that approach was or whatever occurred, that's on them. But you can definitely entertain and education them. Number two, it's okay to not, I should say it like this. It's okay to walk into a room and navigate the room and understand what's happening in the room. I always tell people, pay attention to where people sit at a table. Oftentimes, 9 times out of 10, and this is just out of hierarchy, for some strange reason, if you go in a room, they always save the end seat for the highest person in charge. What I always tell people is if you're the highest person in charge, sit in the middle, be a part of the population. It makes people more comfortable. So that way, as you're showcasing that knowledge and experience, they don't feel like you're at the end talking down to them. You're actually part of that community, regardless of what table you're sitting at.
I'm just going to do some snaps behind the scenes right now because yes, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing those tips. I know that was kind of offsite, but like I was just genuinely curious because I'm sure obviously a lot of us too, your difficult tone, you're sassy and spicy, all of the above. So
Right.
yeah, I think that was a very well needed answer to all of us in general, because I feel like we know that we, you know, are passionate people, but it's just a matter of how to actually showcase that. So I think it kind of also leads
Absolutely.
to our next question too of how do you handle the constant changes of the spectrum, like the effects by hair texture, colorism, especially in different parts across the nation, you know, north, south, east, west, like how do you handle that?
Oh my gosh. So I've learned so much. I'm going to take you back quite a few years because I'm not going to tell you my age. But way, way back in the beginning of my corporate life, I learned something really fast. Because I didn't look like the rest of them, I had to figure out how to look like the rest of them. And for about 10 years, I kept my hair in a high asymmetrical bob, very straight, so that I looked like I belonged at the table. I was young, I was in my 20s, I didn't know, and I was trying to navigate this really strange corporate world that nobody had educated me about. I had no idea how I'd gotten there, but I knew I was there and I had to do the job. And so, what that did for me was it allowed them to look at me and they were like, yeah, I'm not quite sure what she is, but yeah, she fits the mold. Like you're walking in the room and you're making sure your hair looks a certain way. You made sure your nails, which I don't do anymore, but make sure they were either like a really tasteful red or maybe a French. And that's as far as I went. But colorism in hair is such a huge part of what happens regardless of where you are working and what part of the country it is, but it is very different depending on where you are, and it is the craziest thing you will ever learn. So let's talk about the Northeast, right? So like I said, I grew up in the Northeast. The community is different. For some reason, Latinos and African Americans, they come together. It's a different type of culture, a different type of vibe, right? And so if you show up with curly hair, there's no question, right? If you show up with straight hair, there's no question. If you show up in a hoodie and a pair of sweatpants and your kicks, it doesn't matter. You just belong there. But when you start to navigate outside of that community, it is very different. And so, just like they've been instilling these crown acts around the country, right? That we belong as part of that because our hair texture, look at it, it is not straight. And if you think it's not professional, then shame on you. I'm gonna wear it the way I want to wear it now. I didn't know that earlier in my career. Go to the South. So I'm currently located in Atlanta, Georgia. Very, very different community. Oh my gosh, when I got down here, I was like, where's my bodegas? I can't find my food, number one. Number two, that they don't look like me. Where are all the folks? And by then I had gotten comfortable with the way I looked. I got comfortable with the curly hair. But I was being put into a community that I didn't understand. Culturally, here the lines of division when it comes to colorism are different. It is 2023 and it is still happening, folks. It is the reality of it. However, you can navigate it, right? Um, but we have to learn to navigate what that looks like. So it was always like, hey, what are you? Are you are you half white, half black? And I was like, no. Well, you're not Mexican. No, I'm not. And I'd be like, I'm Puerto Rican. Oh, and I would get the face. But your English is good. Oh, that is a plucker for me. That's another conversation for another time. But just being able to be myself and not be concerned. The South is a whole different thing, and I've learned to navigate like how people talk to you. Why do they talk to you? How do they approach you? And then don't go into the Midwest. Oh my gosh, anybody out here from the Midwest? Because my goodness, that's a whole different way of life, and it's even harder to navigate there. But it's the same type of thought process. Colorism exists. And then let's go to Cali. My youngest is currently at UC San Diego, and we're learning all about the fact that they don't have folks on her campus that look like her, and the population is very different. And we're navigating the same thing, but in the opposite direction. They're like, "Oh, you guys aren't Mexican? Are you from South America?" And we're like, "No, we're Puerto Rican." "Oh, and you're out here?" And I'm like, wow. So it's such a difference depending on where you are, depending on the color of your skin, depending on the texture of your hair. Within our own community, colorism exists. And I don't think anybody understands the power of how we have to navigate that and come to the reality that we have to figure out a way how to get that out of people's minds and realize that we're just people, and take me for what I am, and look at my skill and my experience and my knowledge, and don't be concerned with the outward. But I'm not going to change the way I look or how I act or how I present myself at any table to make anybody else feel comfortable.
Wow, that was so great. It's too true, right? Like everything you're saying, and even though you were talking about your experience in the South, like there's been times where I know people that in the North have to even bring out things such as the Crown Act in New Jersey. You know?
That's insanity. Like, what time are we in? It's nuts.
It's so wild. It's so wild. So we're gonna get down to we're just about at time, but we're gonna get down to our last question just because it's our fun fact question, and I love asking our fun fact questions. So since you have a great relationship with your family, you know, you're a whole mom and a whole grandma. I'm gonna always repeat that every time because wow, okay. Like, what's your favorite thing to drink when you're at family gatherings, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic?
Oh my gosh. I know everyone's probably like, oh, she's going to say coquito. And I'm like, no, no, I'm not. I do love coquito. Non-alcoholic coquito would be wonderful. But why don't we talk about one thing that just is so near and dear to me? Like I think about it and it's hard to recreate because it's part of why I love it so much. So growing up in the community and growing up with my family, I remember like even my grandmother making hot chocolate. This sounds insane, right? Hot chocolate. How many of you know about hot chocolate and just a small piece of queso at the bottom of that cup? It is amazing. Like to be able to go back and think about watching my grandmother, who, by the way, love her dearly. She passed in her early 50s, many, many years ago. But she only had really one side of her body function because she was partially paralyzed. So I remember her guayando chocolate with a knife. Not even like a thing to do it like as far as just making it easy, but just making it from scratch, putting it in the pot, making that like that memory is so near and dear to me. And then going to like my father's side, my aunts, they still do it. They're very traditional and they do this when we get together. They'll be like, okay, you know, hot chocolate or café, quien quiere? And they'll make equal distributions. And I remember going to my aunt's house and my husband was like, why y'all putting cheese at the bottom of your hot chocolate? I'm like, oh, you have no idea. And now that became such a favorite for him, but it's the memory. It's the memory that's instilled in our brains with regards to who it's attached to, what occurred. For some reason, the hot chocolate just tastes so amazing because I'm with them. It's just not the same if I do it myself.
Oh, I love that. So now we know Sara's love language is quality time.
All day. Quality time beats everything.
I love it. I love it. Sarah, this was so great. Thank you so, so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it. Some people are in the chat like, what kind of cheese? Mozzarella, cheddar? So
Oh my God, cheddar all day. Cheddar. Not mozzarella.
oh,
It's all kind of stringy. It won't work.
I mean, I'm gonna have to try it and I'll get back to you on that. I'll try the mozzarella. I'll take one for the team. But thank you so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate your words of wisdom, your knowledge, and just joining us overall. Our community is popping in the chat right now. We're really, really excited to see it. And, you know, if you guys want to connect with Sada, you know, she's on LinkedIn, whatever the case. Yep, she is a free spirit and such a breath of fresh air to talk to. So we appreciate you, Sada, and thank you so much for joining us today. And we will definitely see you soon. We appreciate you.
For sure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.